I'm Dr. Adrian Preda, an academic psychiatrist and a professor of psychiatry at University of California, Irvine School of Medicine, and the editor-in-chief of Psychiatric News. And I have the pleasure of talking today with Dr. Dean Ornish. Dr. Ornish is the founder and president of the nonprofit Preventive Medicine Research Institute and a clinical professor of medicine at UCSF and at UCSD. Dean, you have been recognized as a Time 100 innovator by Time magazine, as one of the 50 most influential members of your generation by Life magazine, as one of the most interesting people of the year by People magazine, and the list of accolades could go on and on. But I'm really excited that you are going to have another award, well-deserved award added to that list, which is you are actually going to be our inaugural Viswanathan Family Lifestyle Medicine and Psychiatry awardee, which you are going to receive at the APA annual meeting in LA this evening. So thank you so much for actually being here with me today, and I appreciate having an opportunity to talk to you. So I'm going to start, you'll not be surprised by that I'm a psychiatrist, so many of us know you through your pioneering work, but I would like to start with the person behind the research. On a number of occasions, you spoke candidly about a difficult period in your youth, a time of suicidal depression that changed the course of your life. Could you tell us about that moment?
Sure. And by the way, my younger brother Stephen is a psychiatrist. So it really was a pivotal event in my life. It really changed the whole trajectory of my life. Having survived it, I don't recommend it to anyone, but sometimes the things that are the most painful, as you know, can often be the most transformative if you get the right guidance at that time. And fortunately, I did. So when I was 19, I was a student at Rice University in Houston, which, among other distinctions, which wasn't in the course catalog, had the highest suicide rate per capita of any school in the country that year. And I later found out why. And it's a long story, but the shorter version is that I had a kind of a combined double whammy of feeling like what we now call a classical imposter syndrome, that I was somehow with a bunch of really smart kids, and it was just a matter of time before the admissions committee realized what a mistake they'd made at letting me in. One of the hallmarks of depression is a reality distortion, and I was convinced that I was stupid and that the only, somehow I managed to fool the admissions committee that I wasn't, and pretty soon they'd figure out what a mistake they made by letting me in. But beyond that, there was also this sense of, I had what I guess I would call now is a spiritual vision that was more than I could handle at the time, which is that nothing can bring lasting happiness. And so the combination of feeling like I would never amount to anything because I was stupid, and even if I did, it wouldn't matter, was like, well, okay, well, why bother, right? Why bother? Who cares? Nothing matters. I could take all the meaning out of life. And then I thought, well, why don't I just kill myself? Dead people look happy, and I couldn't even sit still. I was so agitated. I even stayed up for a week straight. I would watch the hands of the clock go around. I just couldn't even sleep. And I got to and I later learned that kind of sleep deprivation itself will make you stupid and make you crazy. I couldn't read a headline on a newspaper and tell you 5 minutes later what it said. And so it's a long story, but the short version is that I was ready to do that. And if, one of the great, I guess, ironic things was that I was so run down that I got this really bad case of infectious mononucleosis, to the point where I literally couldn't get out of bed. And by then my parents got wind that all was not well with me. They came and saw what a wreck I was. And so they brought me home to Dallas, and my secret plan was to get strong enough to kill myself, as crazy as that sounds. Meanwhile, then this was in 1973, my older sister, who had been kind of a child of the 60s, studied with an ecumenical spiritual teacher named Swami Satchidananda, and it really helped her. And so my parents decided to have a cocktail party for the Swami. This was in Dallas in 1973. You can only imagine how unusual that was back then, especially in Dallas. And so there's an old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and that was certainly true for me. So in walks this central casting's idea of what a Swami should look like, with a long white beard and saffron robes and the whole thing. And he gave a talk in our living room, and he started off by saying, nothing can bring you lasting happiness, which I thought, wow, everybody else had said, oh, sure, just get married and, get rich and famous and have kids and all that, and you'll be happy. And I knew that wasn't the case. And so finally, somebody came along, and it felt validating to hear him say that. But then I looked at him, and he's happy and glowing, and I'm about ready to do myself in, and I'm thinking, like, what am I missing here? And he went on to say what really transformed my life, it really turned it around, which, to some people may sound like a New Age cliche, but it was very transformative, which is that nothing can bring you lasting happiness. That's the bad news. The good news is that we already have that. We're not really trained in our culture to see that. We're trained to think, it lies, our happiness and our self-esteem and our well-being lie outside us. If only I had more whatever, more money, more power, more sex, more beauty, more accomplishment, then I could feel good about myself. I could love myself. I could feel like my self-esteem is good. And what the Swami taught me was that the goal of all these spiritual practices is not to bring you a sense of peace and happiness, that we have that already. But not being mindful of that, we run after all these things. If only I had more whatever, then I'd be happy. And what he taught me then was that however that turns out, you're likely to feel bad, because until you get it, you're going to feel really stressed. We know that stress is really more a function of how we perceive the world. And if you think that if only I get, I have to get into medical school in my case, or whatever it was, to be happy, then until you get it, you're really stressed, and the stress levels go way up. And so if you don't get it, you feel stressed. If someone else gets it, then you feel even more stressed, and it reinforces this false view that we live in a very hostile, competitive, zero-sum game world, dog-eat-dog world. The more you get, the less there is for me. And even if we get it, there's this moment of like, I got it. Now I'm happy and I can feel good about myself. But it inevitably doesn't last very long. It's soon followed by either, now what? It's never enough. I remember later in life when I was working with heart patients, one patient said, I can't even enjoy the view from the mountain I've climbed. I'm already looking over the next one. So it's either now what or so what? Big deal. It doesn't really bring that lasting sense of meaning. Another patient said, the letdown that comes from accomplishing a goal is so great. I always make sure I've got a dozen projects going on at the same time, kind of like back in the day, if those of you who are old enough to remember the Ed Sullivan Show with a guy spinning plates and would go, from one plate to the other to keep them all in the air and so they didn't fall and crash. So what he told me was that these spiritual practices, the ancient swamis and rabbis and priests and monks and nuns and mullahs and whatever, didn't develop these techniques to manage stress or to unclog their arteries or lower their blood pressure or all these things that they can do. They're really powerful tools for transformation. They can help us quiet down our mind and body enough to experience an inner sense of peace and joy and well-being that's always there that we may not pay attention to. And so the question then shifts from how can I get what I think I need to be happy and healthy to how can I stop disturbing my own inner sense of peace and well-being that's already there. And that may sound like parsing words, but the implications are really quite profound, because if it's out there, then everybody who has what I think I need to be happy has power over me. But if it's me, that's something I can do something about. Not to blame myself, but to empower myself. So what the Swami said is, at the end of a meditation or a yoga session or whatever you do to quiet down your mind and you're feeling more peaceful, don't attribute that peace to that the meditation brought that to you. It was already there. So then the question shifts from how can I get what I need to how can I stop disturbing what's already there? And that's something I can do something about. So I thought, okay, I'll move killing myself down to plan B. Let me try this weird stuff. And he said, you should be a vegetarian. And I grew up in Texas eating meat 5 times a day. That was a big change. And exercise and meditate and spend more time with friends and family. Eat well, move more, stress less, and love more, as I later simplified it. So I thought, okay, I'll try this weird stuff. And I began to realize that, I can feel more peaceful. It wasn't like I could stay there very long, but just getting glimpses of that helped me realize that I was now looking in the right place. So I went back to school. I transferred to the University of Texas at Austin. I did really well, got into medical school. And so I kind of experienced both ends of that spectrum. I felt a total, utter failure and stupid and a fraud. And, I graduated first in my class and gave the baccalaureate and got in medical school. And I say that not to brag, but just to say how something as simple as shifting how we perceive ourselves and in the world can transform our lives in such powerful ways. And it also taught me that suffering can be a powerful doorway for transformation, but we're not really trained as doctors to see it that way most of the time. We're trained to see it as, something to, when we have a patient with pain, to numb it, to kill it, to literally or figuratively bypass it. But, the reason why pain can be transformative is that change is hard. But if you're hurting enough, then the idea of change becomes more appealing. It's like, wow, this is kind of weird stuff, but I don't know, I'm hurting so bad, let me give this weird stuff a try. And because these underlying biological mechanisms that affect so many chronic diseases are very dynamic, when we make big changes in our lifestyle all at once, we generally feel so much better so quickly. It reframes the whole reason for making lifestyle changes from fear of something bad happening to joy and pleasure and love and feeling good. I mean, in the case of heart patients, for example, their angina usually goes away in a few weeks. And so that instead of saying, oh, I'm going to change my lifestyle to prevent something really bad from happening, like a heart attack or stroke that I don't want to think about. I mean, after someone's had a heart attack, they'll think about it for maybe a month or two, but even then because nobody really wants to think that something bad is ever going to happen to them. So fear is not really a sustainable motivator. But joy and pleasure and love and feeling good are. And so if somebody makes these changes and their chest pain goes away and now they can, do all the things they couldn't do before. They can go back to work or make love with their spouse or play with their kids or, walk across the street without getting chest pain. They say things like, I like eating junk food, but not that much because what I gain is so much more than what I give up and quickly. And so just as I learned I could take all the meaning out of my life when I was so suicidally depressed, I learned that I could imbue my life with meaning in my case, by doing acts of service. This is what I also learned from the Swami, that ironically, the most selfish thing I can do in terms of creating meaning in my life is to live a life of service, because that's what really keeps me out of those dark places.
That was a beautiful, beautiful answer. And there are so many first important but then meaningful things that you discussed that relate directly into the way we practice medicine, and then have even more applications when we come to think about how we meet our patients in medicine in general, but specifically even more so in psychiatry. Which brings me to my next question. Love is a recurring theme in your work, and that's not a metaphor. You think about love as measurable medicine. So my question is, how could we actually make space in psychiatry for love and connection when we think about just treatment plans during brief clinical visits?
Yeah, well, love, people say, well, I get the diet and the exercise and even the meditation. What is this love more stuff? That sounds kind of weird. And it's so ironic that, in cardiology, which is the heart is the symbol for love, it's almost like a four-letter word. It's something that we don't discuss until more recently. But I wrote a book back in 1998 called Love and Survival that reviewed what were then hundreds and now literally tens of thousands of studies that show that people who are lonely and depressed and isolated, which I think is the real epidemic in our culture, are 3 to 10 times more likely to get sick and die prematurely from pretty much all causes when compared to those who have a sense of love and connection and community. And I don't know anything in medicine that has that kind of powerful effect, both directly and indirectly. Directly because it also influences our behaviors. In doing these studies, I got to know the patients in them really well, and I'd say, teach me something. Why do you smoke or overeat or drink too much or abuse fentanyl or alcohol or play so many video games or work all the time? These behaviors seem so maladaptive to me. And they'd say, you don't get it, Dean. You don't have a clue. These behaviors aren't maladaptive. They're very adaptive. They help us deal with our pain, our loneliness, our depression. 50 years ago when you and I were growing up, we had an extended family that we saw regularly, or in a neighborhood with 2 or 3 generations of people who grew up together, or a church or club or synagogue or mosque or something that people went to regularly, or a job that felt secure where your coworkers would be there for a long time. You got to know each other. And today, many people don't have any of those things. And people say, well, that's just modern life. So what? Well, so what is that? The intimacy that we find on the internet is not the same as an in-person kind of intimacy, because if you go to Facebook, one study showed that the more time you spend on Facebook, the more depressed you are. Well, why is that? Because it's not an authentic intimacy. It looks like everybody has this perfect life but you, because people don't post their dark side or their demons, or when they were suicidal in my case, or whatever it happened to be. And so true intimacy, when you grow up in a neighborhood with 2 or 3 generations of people or an extended family, they know you. They don't just know your Facebook profile or your good stuff, or all the nice things you said about me when you introduced me. they know where you messed up, the time you were almost committed suicide or you got busted or got whatever it was, and you know that they know and they know that you know that they know. And there's something really primal about being seen fully, like warts and all, that I see you, I know you're not perfect, and I'm still here for you. Our support groups are really based on that, recreating that, to create a safe environment where people can let down their emotional defenses and talk openly and authentically about what's really going on in their lives without fear that someone's going to judge them or criticize them or make fun of them or abandon them, the usual kinds of fears. And it's the part of our program that people often have the most questions or even apprehension about, but invariably it's the part that's the most meaningful because it's such an unmet need in our culture with the breakdown of the social networks that used to give that to people. So what can you do as a psychiatrist if you have to see a patient every half hour? Well, make them feel loved. We're taught we have to, have this professional distance with our patients. And of course we do to some degree. But at the same time, to make someone feel like they're cared for, if the word love makes you uncomfortable, they say, I'm really here for you. I care about you. You mean something to me. That can be powerfully healing. Vivek Murphy, the former Surgeon General, and I have been friends for many years, and he made this one of the center posts of his term as U.S. Surgeon General to raise awareness about how, we tend to think of the time that we spend with our friends and family and loved one as kind of the luxury that you do after you've done the important stuff. And what we're learning is that it is the important stuff.
Last questions. Dean, you've changed medicine in many ways. What do you hope your legacy will be, and what gives you hope right now?
Oh, that's such a powerful question. To me, the light drives out the darkness. I take solace in that. I think the world is becoming increasingly filled with darkness, and even a small candle can drive out the darkness. And so, I think that as physicians, we need to see ourselves more than just as technicians. If we only are technicians, we're going to lose our jobs anyway, because AI, artificial intelligence, can read a X-ray or a path report, or better than most humans can. And so the science is important. I'm a scientist, but I think the art and the humanity of medicine is really so important. I think we need to kind of go back to our roots of really helping people understand that yes, drugs and surgery can be life-saving, but the sorts of lifestyle changes we can make ourselves can also be transformative. We can use the experience of suffering as a doorway or as a catalyst for transforming our lives in ways that go beyond just living longer. If you told me when I was suicidally depressed I was going to live longer, I'd say, you don't get it. I don't even know if I want to get through the day, So telling somebody who's feeling bad that they're going to live longer isn't necessarily motivating. We need to really get to more of the core values of what really brings us happiness, what brings us a sense of meaning, what makes us feel fully alive. And I think that to the degree that we can combine the best of our science-based medicine, our evidence-based medicine, with our intuition and with our experience as the art of medicine and not just the science of it, but blend the two together and not get too stuck in any disciplines. Oh, I'm a psychiatrist, I only deal with this, or I'm an internist, I don't really deal with the mind. We have to really see people as a whole, because that's how we can serve them the best.
Thank you. This was a rich conversation, grounded, expansive, and I really appreciate it for being very human in so many ways. And I'm sure that our audience will walk away both challenged and inspired. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. To me, awareness is always the first step in healing. And so I'm very grateful for this interview, and I'm very grateful for this honor. And I have nothing but, I don't know, I'm kind of at a loss for words just to say how much I appreciate this. Thank you.